the population as a whole. But in terms of your tax contribution, in terms of, it is significant. And when you look at the budget now, a lot of the government's, the budget, a lot of the expenditure goes in towards recurrent expenditure, right? And what is left now is now development expenditure. What we need, as Richard was saying, what we need is some type of revenue stream that doesn't really, I know it's difficult, I'm not saying it's easy, but we need some type of revenue stream that doesn't burden the taxpayers, so much. We have to give them discretion. And at the same time, that is the TT side of the equation that we're talking about. Property tax, the increased electricity rates, all of the reduction in subsidies and all this other auxiliary taxes and so on, it doesn't impact the U.S. side. How are we going to address the foreign exchange situation? The foreign exchange situation is still very tight, right? It is a dire situation still there. So, all of these taxes, we're looking at one. And at the same time, when we borrow, when our government borrows, it means that the current population is living at the expense of a future generation, because there's a future generation going to have to repay all of that borrowing. So that's from the macro side of it. In terms of the Prime Minister, I believe, I'm subject to correction, but I believe that I heard the Prime Minister say that if we do not implement property tax, we may have to approach the IMF.
Yeah, he said that in an article. I think in one of the forums that he had recently.
Right.
And
He said, so that is to tell you, they understand that the implementation of the tax is hurried and disorganized, but that is the dire need to get revenue to keep the economy afloat.
Yeah, but just to touch on a point that Bhushan made here, I think the government, they're taking this thing. Yes, it's serious, but they're bringing it off in a lightly scaled manner, because the minister himself said that, look, you don't have water in your house. Forget all the taxes that we just spoke about, that each person is paying, but you don't have water in your house. Pay a property tax and we might be able to bring water to your house. That was so, in my opinion, so distasteful on a citizen that is already heavily burdened with all these taxes, and high inflationary pressures, Even when you go to the market, the price of arrows is $20-something a pound.
Which is a basic food item, right?
Basic food item. I just wanted to touch on that. It's difficult. When you go to the market and you just buy a couple things to last you for the week, or you're not even a week, it's $300-400, right? And still have some individuals working for $500 a week.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? So how are these people going to survive? And this is the manner in which we should be looking at things.
Now, you spoke, the food, our cost of living is not just determined by the food. We still have a food basket, right? But to live in our current society, as we saw when we had COVID, you must have internet, you must have cell phones. Your children can't do their homework and so on without access to internet, can't study without internet. Your
Which is an additional cost.
Yeah, cable TV, all of that, all of this wired connection to it comes at a price, right? It comes at a price. So,
And there is, the society, when you walk around the society and go into those communities, you could see that there are literally frustrated parents and individuals out there. And we, as a government, the government should be trying to alleviate that, right, rather than put additional pressure on these families. And this is what is going to happen, because, people are literally scared out of the wits right now, because, let me just take that valuation. I had a real live running with that valuation. I happened to approach my home one day, and I saw this young lady. She has to be about maybe 17 or 18 years, walking around with this badge and taking pictures of people's homes. So I came home and I came to the back and I said, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" Because it's a concern, you taking pictures of people's homes.
Yes.
And you could see that it is not very organized, So you taking pictures. I asked the question of what you're doing. She said, well, I'm working with the valuation division and we're taking pictures. Could I come, if you want, could I come into your home and take? I said, no, you can't come into my home. I don't know who you are or what you're doing, you know. And you know, if this was a first world country, you know, a system would have been put in place where when you do your valuations, it would have been so conflicting and confusing to the citizenry.
Yes.
You know, because Bhushan and I living next door to one another. And Bhushan valuation is different from my valuation. I mean, how in the world that could be?
Correct.
And that is what is affecting the citizenry. And it is scaring the citizenry. I mean, and I can't blame them because you are telling me that if I, as let me say a pensioner, for example, cannot pay my property tax, Bhushan just spoke about postponing the debt for future generations to pay. And you are telling me that I could postpone my debt. And it is not easily as what is how the minister is perpetuated you know. And you tell me that I have to postpone my debt for a future generation. When that generation come, you come and you take all what I worked my whole life for. You just take that and sell it to repay a debt to the government. And what the government is doing with that money? Are they fixing the roads? Are they making ease of business? Are they making the ease of business better for businesses to survive? What are they doing? Are they providing water? Are they providing better electricity? Basic necessities, and we are not seeing that happening now with all these taxes that we are paying. With property tax, do we expect that to improve? Mostly, highly unlikely.
Well, before we continue, let me ask if we have any calls. So just for the benefit of those viewing and listening, 663-2335, 663-1027, you are free to call at any time moving forward for the purpose of engaging in any discussion with Dr. Bhushan Singh, Mr. Richard Ramkisoon, myself on this issue of the property tax. Gentlemen, both of you have touched on in-depth, well thought out concerns that have plagued us, you know, before, and it continues to plague us, right? At a macroeconomic level in terms of revenue stream, what does it mean for, you know, the economy, how will it translate and benefit the people, ordinary people? Richard, you mentioned something there which I think people have, and this has featured in the debates, on recent debates in the parliament as well. When you don't pay property tax, what happens? Right? The question is what happens. Under the law, you are liable to have your property seized. You are liable to have something called distrain. It is a process where they say they can distrain for rent, meaning that you can, not valuation division, but on the whole, the Board of Inland Revenue can take steps to seize items that belong to you.
Exactly.
So this person who is going around taking the pictures without your permission, and yes, the law allows them to take pictures and stuff. Number one, the question of their credentials is up in arms because we are not sure what their qualifications, how qualified they are to assess the annual rental value in the first instance. Number two, taking pictures and not having, you know, access to determine, well, okay, what, you know, the inside state of a property may be. Some properties are properly fenced, so you're really standing from a distance looking at these things. These are the realities, but how do you deal with those things if you are not properly qualified as an evaluator to treat with those matters? What is it that they're going to do? They're going to say, well, when I took the picture on file and this person is now not paying rent, I saw that there's a washing machine in the yard or in the backyard, and I'm going to distrain for property tax that are outstanding, and therefore we're going to seize, we're going to come down there with people reinforced by army and police personnel, and we're going to take up people's belongings. This is where we are going. Well, you raise an important point, and we have to look at this thing again. When you look at Trinidad and Tobago and the working population in Trinidad and Tobago, you would have noted that, well, they recently concluded the negotiations at 4%. That was right? And you have, you know, a section of the population of Trinidad and Tobago that is on fixed income. They mightn't be pensioners, they mightn't be, but they might be living from paycheck to paycheck they might be living from paycheck to paycheck.
Well, most public servants live from paycheck to paycheck, eh?
And you have even, but at least some of them might have a secure income from month to month. The public servants might have a secure income from, but there are others who do not have a secure income from month to month. They might have a property. They might, and I saw a case on the newspaper recently where there was a dilapidated property and the valuation was, ridiculous, right?
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
And you have a number of people who, a significant portion of people that with property, you could call it property tax, you could call it 3%, 2%, at 1.5%, it might still be difficult for them to come up with this money to pay the property tax. And how are they, and even with, okay, they say that, it would be attached to the property and when a future generation inherits it, that then they pay the property tax. You're assuming that they could pay the property tax and the stamp duty if you have to transfer the deed?
But my question is, Bhushan, if you defer the tax, the tax system is the same all over the world, right?
Yeah.
If you don't pay a tax, it attracts penalty and interest.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you defer the tax for, let me say, 10 years,
Yeah.
doesn't that attract penalty and interest?
Correct.
So if you owe $10 today, in 10 years' time, when your grandson takes over that property, he has to pay penalty and interest on that.
Yeah.
Then today he might not be able to afford it, but then he might not be able to afford it. What you're going to do? Seize the house?
And this is something that I know a lot of people have raised concerns over, because the Minister of Finance is saying that it is a proportionate step that the government is taking by implementing this this property tax, this version of property tax, in that if you are somehow impecunious, that you will be able to apply for this exemption. And it's not really an exemption. What it is that it is a deferment.
It's
right?
It's not an exemption, it's a deferral.
So you're going to defer whatever is required to be paid by property tax as at the 24th or to the 28th of March, 2024. And then if someone else inherits the property later on, and they themselves, you're saying that they themselves can apply as well if they are unable to afford property tax. But the question is, a lot of persons, as the state of the economy, the macroeconomics you talk about, Bhushan, may not be in a position, they may not qualify according to the threshold, the criteria that is there in the property tax. But that does not mean that they have sufficient disposable income available to them, that they are saving, and at that time when they inherit the properties, that they will be in a position to pay the monies.
You call them the working poor.
The working poor, yes. So there's a working poor class.
Yes.
And that I have to say that working poor class is a wider category of persons than people might imagine.
Yes.
So what happens in a situation like that? Richard is right. What are you going to do? Now, I mean, that is one way of looking at it. Over the last few months, what we have seen is that people have received notification of annual rental values being ascribed to their properties. What happens? In some cases, you get annual rental values, $1,000+ whatever it is. Some cases it is more. The point I wish to make is that it is based on that you will work the 3%. The government now, they have amended the law and they have said, no, we are reducing that 3% to 2%. But are there no gift that you're giving to these people, right? Whilst that 3% and 2%, the methodology of arriving at that is questionable to start with. Assuming it's 2%, you're still not in a position to pay it. What do? Or you don't agree with the annual rental value. You have to lodge an objection. When you lodge the objection, it's going to take time to have a determination on that. The way the law is configured now, and if it implemented fully, it means that people will be required to pay the 2% on the annual rental value. And whilst your objection is pending, and as it stands now, Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't have persons appointed to deal with the objections at this point in time.
Well, they don't have any system in place at the BIR right now to deal with any detailed aspect of the property tax. You know, and I was reading an article there with this annual rental value, right? Just to touch on that as you bring it up. Now, 99% of the time, the Commission of Valuations cannot come up with an annual rental value. So how does he come up with an annual rental value? He takes the capital cost of the property and multiply it by 3.5%. So if your property costs $1 million, 3.5% is 35,000.
Right.
Then you minus the 10% that they're giving you, and then you multiply by the 2 or 3%. So in some instances, and this is where the real action is, because properties in these recent times is costing $2 million. If you look at you just go to the classified ads and you will see 2.5 million,
Yeah.
3 million. So when you take a property that's costing $2 million,
Yeah.
the annual rental value based on this calculation that I'm seeing here is 3.5%, which is 70,000.
Yes.
And then 70,000, and this is what the population doesn't know. Because we are all confused and we are asking, but the Commissioner of Valuations, how is he coming up with these annual rental values? There's a formula, right? So they're just assuming in this development, and this is my assertion, I'm not 100% sure, but I mean, they would not have put it in legislation if they wasn't going to apply that formula.
Right.
And I think that is what is causing the confusion, and the population have to understand how they are coming up with these figures. Because you are telling me that I have an annual rental value of 70, right? When you divide 70 by 12, right? That is what, almost $6,000 a month. You tell me that I collect in rent for a property that I don't know even, I have no intention of renting.
Yes.
And then you are charging me a tax on that, right? A further tax. Then I have to come and pay insurance for my house, and then pay a 6% tax on the insurance rate. I mean,
Yes.
It's really burdensome for the population. How are we going to survive for the future? What is going to happen to our kids? You know, those are the kind of issues that the population will be looking at.
What you're looking at here is that, and I mean the government has basically admitted this, is that property tax is not optional. It has to come because they do not have an alternate revenue stream to satisfy. So this there's a must. And okay, you need some tax revenue, and I don't think any of us, are averse to paying taxes. But
No.
of course, the valuation methodology is something that has to be considered. But we are also in a soft market right now, a soft property market, right? And in some areas, there's even more. If you look at Port of Spain, there are a number of buildings for sale in Port of Spain for years that nobody wants.
Yeah, because besides buying the building, you have to pay a heavy stamp duty.
You're right, but nobody is buying it.
So it's difficult.
Nobody is renting it. And that is giving you an indication of, you understand, if you were to take a little pulse in some of these areas, nobody is buying it. Nobody wanted there. I know a particular building on Independence Square has been up for sale for 6 years. Might have crossed 6 years by now. Right?
Well, you see, in order to purchase those buildings, first you have to have the avenue to access the funding.
Yes.
Right? And I could give you an example. In Shoguanas, on Carney Savannah Road,
Yeah.
I like to do practical examples. If you walk down or drive down Carney Savannah Road and put your head left or right, the amount of vacant buildings that is accessible to anybody who wants to rent.
Yeah.
And the landlords, they are still pursuing heavy rental, right? Large amounts, rather than looking at maybe trying to, they say a small amount is better than,
Yes.
And that is what is happening in the economy right now.
Yeah.
It's pressure all wrong.
Yeah.
It's an all wrong pressure,
Yeah.
right? And they are concerned, and I brought that up earlier, the people are concerned that, look, we are ageable, we are pensioners, we have a little property to rent, and who is going to pay, how are we going to pay this property tax?
Mm-hmm.
And that is what is basically affecting the population mentality right now.
One of the concerns that have been raised is given the definitions of property tax, right? And given the definitions in the Property Tax Act, of what land means, and you have land means all land covered with water, all buildings or any part of any building, etc. That if you have had for the last however many years, work being rolled out so that the valuation rule could arrive at the 50%, because that is where you will be able to implement property tax, right?
Yeah.
So for those who may not know, there's something called a valuation rule, and it means that they have to acquire information on a substantial amount of registered properties
Correct.
in the country before they can actually proceed to the next step now, which is what is being rolled out, which is the annual rental value and the amount that you have to pay by way of property tax. If it took however many years, we are talking about years, to reach this questionable 50%, I am not wholly convinced that they have reached 50%, but the government is saying that they have crossed the threshold of the 50%. How long would it take to get the other 50% on that valuation rule? How long would it take to get information relating to these property owners? How long would it take to get annual rental value assessed for all of these persons and properties? And then when that takes however many other years, is it that that person at that time is now going to have to pay taxes retroactive to January of 2024?
Yes.
Because Bush and I believe that is the time frame that they are looking
Correct,
at. But
yes.
whatever time they want to start the property tax effective as at, whether it's January 2024 or later this year, let's say in 5 years' time, 6 years' time, given the rate it is going, and the questionable methodology and methods that they are utilizing to implement property tax. When somebody's property is actually valued and assessed in 5 years' time, is it that that person is now going to have to carry the burden of paying retroactive 5, 6, 7 years, as the case may be? And this is something, given there are draconian provisions in this act. Again, seizure, forfeiture of property, distraining for rent. You can take people's belongings and you can seize the property. And this is what is frightening. If you don't get the methodology right, which it cannot be disputed that it is marred in a lot of controversy, right? The methodology is very questionable. It insults the way people expect things to be done at governmental agency levels, but it is what it is, and therefore we are being put through, the ordinary people are being put through stress and strains. They are struggling to have to pay something. They're struggling to understand why they need to pay that amount. If they object because the anomalies that are arising, it is so blatantly obvious that the assessment is bad, and they have to go through that procedure of objecting to it, which a lot of people have done. They're not going to have it determined within 12 months, so they have to pay. What is going to happen to all of this now? Let's say in 1 year time. We are in March of 2024. What do you anticipate, Richard and Bushan, will happen by, let's say, March or June of 2025 in terms of how this is going to impact on people? Are they going to feel confident that the system is working? Are they going to feel any reassurance that, look, the government asked for an extension of time because they need to acquire data and they need to have the valuations done over? How is this going to, what can we look forward to, if anything at all?
How the tax system works, right, is that once the taxes are due, so we take corporation tax, for example, is due on the 30th of April, right?
Yes.
Once the tax is due, no matter how far down the assessment comes, but the tax is due on the 30th of April, you have to pay penalty and interest. My understanding, because I haven't seen anything in the legislation contrary to what I'm going to say, is that if the tax is effective from the 1st of January 2024, and that assessment you receive, Bushan, is in 2025, you have penalty and interest together with the tax. Retroactive. Right? I haven't seen anything different in the legislation. I don't think the minister really addressed that. But it is going to be a retroactive tax. And that is where the individuals is going to have, the house owners, citizenry is going to have issues. Right? The other thing, my concern is that, and I haven't heard him say it, I don't know if I missed it, is that the 50% valuation rule, when the Commissioner of Valuation gets that rule, you know, his next step is to take it to the Board of Inland Revenue. for them to put procedural systems in place now to be able to raise the assessment and implement the collection of tax, because they are the collector of the taxes.
Yes.
Has that been done? We don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, I made some inquiries, and I don't know if it's a secret or it's a secret section or whatever, but I haven't gotten information on that as yet.
Yeah.
So we don't know. Would the minister come at some point and say, hey, we have passed on, the commission has passed on the 50% valuation rule to the BIR, and there's a section that has been established to set up procedural and infrastructural systems in place to raise the assessment and to collect the tax.
Well, I think it is safe to infer, to surmise, that based on the proposed amendment to the property tax, which has been passed, mind you, it has been passed,
it has been,
effective yesterday in the upper house, in the Senate, whereby they sought an extension of time until June to be able to issue notices and to collect information and what have you. We could get into the technical details and stuff.
So I don't want to stop you there, but if they ask for extension of time, then it goes to my point.
Yes.
The valuation rule has not been properly instituted at the BIR.
Correct.
To set up procedural infrastructures.
And this is it. So it is safe to infer or to surmise that it is not set up, and the infrastructure for dealing with this implementation of property tax in a fair and equitable manner does not exist to date.
Yeah.
Hence the reason why you had to go to the parliament and ask to extend the time. And so, but let me ask Bhushan to chime in here. Mm-hmm. Are we looking at, based on what we have spoken about, the real likelihood, and not possibility, but the real likelihood that the working poor class can be faced with an insurmountable debt within a short time frame that they will not be able to recover from? What are you going to do? You're going to have to take a loan to hopefully get a loan to pay off property tax debt?
Your standard of living as a whole, you're going to have to take a look at your standard of living, because from the government side of it, this revenue stream called the property tax is not an option for them, because according to the government, without this, that they don't have the revenue to operate. So they were looking at a broad-based tax that was difficult to avoid, and property tax was the opportunity. So this is what, in my opening salvo, I say you could have called it property tax, you could have called it XYZ tax, you could have called it ABC tax. They just happened to call it property tax, right? And you came up with some way to implement this broad tax to cover everybody. On the flip side, I just want to add something here in the bit here. I mean, I strain a little bit. But you also have some other pressing matters that is going to take some money to fix that is of national concern. One is the NIS. Raising the retirement age alone wouldn't fix the problem. You're going to, it is going to require raising the retirement age. It is also may require an injection of cash, which the government may not have right now. So you're looking at possibly increased contribution rates and so on, right? So all of these are definitely going to have an impact. The other question you could ask me is, do you think that there's a lot of consumer confidence in the economy? I would have to look at some of these, the CSO reports and central bank reports and to see. But from my casual conversation with businessmen like yourself, Richard, I am getting the feeling that there's a lukewarm response. I haven't heard anybody say that, business is booming, right? Generally across the board. And if it is booming in some areas, you have that dichotomy, the people who could afford and the people who cannot afford, right? The fixed income people, and so on. So that is an area that would warrant further attention, in terms of the impact of all of these taxes, on the revenue. And you see in some countries, you see it happen in Argentina and so on, they had debt defaults and all these sorts of things, right? So I think that the government here is looking at any way right now to increase the revenue stream, at least on the TT side. On the US side, the Forex side, that is part of the equation that still remains unbalanced and would need some work by the government to fix
Bhushan,
that.
we're not doing anything right now to increase our foreign exchange earnings,
Yeah.
I'm not seeing that because, if you go to the bank, as a business person, when you go to the bank, you have to go on queue,
Yeah.
right? To get 1,500, whatever it is. It takes you a while to pay your bills.
Yeah.
A lot of businessmen are suffering with that right now because I know that the foreign suppliers are very accommodating
Yeah.
because they're doing business also. So if they cut you off completely, they lose business.
Yes.
So a man have a $30,000 bill to pay. He takes about 3 or 4 months
Yeah.
before he could get that, and you have bills piling up on bills. This is the reality of what is happening right now. There would be a time when businesses would not be able to pay, not that they can't afford it because they have the $30, but they would not be able to meet their foreign debts. And that time, to me, is coming soon. A lot of people don't have access.
What we need sometimes is a different paradigm, to really get this change. You need a different paradigm. If I might, again, digress a little bit, we have the case of, if you go to Guyana and you go with TT dollars, they don't want your TT dollars. If a Guyanese come to Trinidad and you pay them and they pay you with Guyanese dollars, you don't want Guyanese dollars, you want TT dollars or US dollars. If you go to Barbados, they don't want your TT dollars, they either want Barbadian dollars or US dollars. And what that is really saying is that we do not have confidence in each other's currency. And this paradigm shift when we're looking at is that, you must have, we must look at things differently if we want, perhaps this is another program, we must look at things differently if we want to solve these problems. Taxation by itself, okay, I was talking to somebody in Barbados and they were so amused that, trying to implement property tax, that, all over the world they have property tax and so on. But taxation by itself, and I think this is where citizens sometimes feel a little bit hurt. Taxation by itself is one thing. Everybody know they have to pay taxes. But people want to see value for money.
That's the key.
You want to see value for money. If I pay my taxes, I would like to see, where it is going, what it is doing, and, an improvement in services and so on. And I think that is critical there.
And Bhushan, before you go on further, that same issue has been bugging me with those regional corporations because it has been touted that this money is going to go to the regional corporations and all of a sudden your home and your environment will be improved, your roads and your drains and, these regional corporations are this infrastructural system in those operational guidelines and those corporations going to change? Is it just going to change by the flick of a finger? By giving them property tax? I am not seeing that. When you look at what is happening, I saw something on the newspaper the other day where in some regional corporation, some road or drain was trying to build and they're taking a month and, long and inconveniencing a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? By giving the regional corporations these fundings, or because now they cut it down to 2% instead of 3%, how is that going to work? Are they going to collect the funds and spend it themselves? And are there going to be rules on how they're going to spend this money?
Yes.
I haven't seen any of that.
Yeah.
Is the government going to be like a auditor or overshadowing, or looking at the projects that they're going to propose and how is the government going to approve those projects? Those are the things that are coming into light. You can't just say, look, I'm going to liberate your regional corporation and they're going to have more money to spend and enhance your environment. We're not seeing that right now.
Yes.
And they are getting how much millions of dollars to do these things. And where is the money going? We're not seeing it. We want to know. You know what I mean? Are they going to be favoring certain districts in the corporations because these two councillors or mayor or chairman is close? And what about the one that I vexed with Bushan? So me are going on by Bushan area to fix up. I mean, those are the things have to be addressed. As human beings we're dealing with, right? And you know, we want to see you see, you need accountability and you need transparency, right? We know it's politics you're dealing with, but still at some point you have to come and tell the people, look, I'm going to take your property, your property tax, and this is how it's going to be disbursed, and this is the benefits that you're going to see.
I have to say that we have just added our voices and our sentiments on this property tax, and there's a lot on it because by the very nature of what property tax represents, it is going to have a serious impact on the population. In the debate, for those who may not have followed it in what I'm about to say in these terms, meaning in the parliament, how this law has come to pass, this only requires a simple majority, which means that the government with its majority would have had it passed, simple majority would have had it passed in the lower house, the House of Representatives. And then it went to the upper house, the Senate, the day before in the parliament. And what that means, and I'm saying this for a purpose, that you had in the Senate an interesting unfolding of support or lack thereof for the property tax, in that you had the government, which would be the 16 senators, saying yes to the property tax amendment. You would have had, I believe, 7 out of the 9 senators abstaining from the vote. Then you would have had opposition senators who obviously would have taken the position to say no. And it leaves 2 of the independent senators there now, 1 who voted against and 1 voted for. Now, we can debate about the one who voted for and why this independent senator felt the need to vote for and all of these things. But it is 1 independent senator's vote that allowed the government to pass this property tax bill in the Senate. Amendment, that is. And I am saying it for the purpose of raising our concluding statements on this. It means that the independent senators were convinced that there are serious issues which needed to be addressed before you are going to the population to tell them that you are extending time for the purpose of collecting information, that you are implementing something, even though the government is selling it as though it is a gift. Listen, we are going to reduce 3% that you're required to pay to 2%, so don't worry anymore. So these senators were clearly of the view that there is a lot. And I know one senator in particular, if not all of the independent senators, but one in particular, because it's reported in the papers, said that they had concerns over the out-of-sync valuations, which we continue to say it, the methodology, the credentials of the evaluators, all of these things are up in arms. It is up in the air, and people are up in arms. And so what would be your concluding comments, knowing that this is the fate of the property tax bill, that despite serious objection by the opposition, despite the independent senators, only 1 of the 9 taking the position that he would support, whereas 7 took the position that they are abstaining from the vote. In other words, look, we are independent senators. We are not going to say yes or no on this one. But clearly we have sufficient concerns about it, which will still put us in a position where we are abstaining from saying that we are giving you support. And then you had 1 who outright said no. What does that say? I mean, for our concluding comments, gentlemen, what do you think, that spells? Is it that means that despite the government getting ahead with its simple majority, that we can expect some greater accountability, transparency, calls from the population, pushback from the population, that you cannot roll out this unless you get it correct? It must be, as you say, we must have all the answers up front as to what it means, even down to the local government level. If you're saying it is going to be given to local government, to corporations, it means that we must also know that not that it is going to be given to local government to spend, we must know how the local government is going to actually have parameters in how they spend it as well. Because somebody can say, but I pay in property tax and I am in the worst road.
Exactly.
Right? I have had dilapidated conditions with the drains and the potholes in the road and whatever. I am paying property tax, but I seen some people down there who I have reason to believe they're not paying property tax, but their roads smoother than mine and all of these things. Richard, how do you think this will roll out in the next 2 to 3 months and moving on? Because we're going to have a mid-year review.
Yes.
And then we're going to have budget in September, October. What, at least if we can forecast between now and that time.
Well, how I look at it, I mean, one of the tenets of economics is that your population must have food, clothing, and shelter. I think that was Adam Smith, right? You must have food, clothing, and shelter. This property tax is definitely going to affect the shelter aspect of things. It might affect the food because you're affecting people's disposable income, clothing, school, education. But the issue here is valuation. And we have to come out, the Commission of Valuations have to come out and say, indicate to the population, well, look, this is how we are, this is the system that we are using, and this is what we expect. So you, as a property owner, will know, well, look, this is equitable across board, and I could calculate my own valuation, right? And it might be less or more than what the commissioner has valued my property for. Then you have now where only 50% has been, according to the commissioner, has been created, the rule has been created. What is going to happen to the other 50%? Are they going to get an assessment in 2-3 years' time? What is going to happen? Are you going to come with an amnesty now to say, well, look, from the 1st of January 2024 to 2025, I'm going to have an amnesty, so everybody has been saved this thing now, so to bring everybody back now to an equitable position. So there is going to be chaos, there's going to be fear, there's going to be fright among the population, even me, thinking, well, look, you know, how much I'm going to pay, right? What is going to happen? Because it was a frightful thing to see this person walking around the neighborhood and just snapping pictures, you know, and they are using that to say, well, look, this man's house costs $3 million, so I'm going to use 3.5% of the capital cost. But do you have evidence? Do you know when the house was constructed, the year? Do you know that there was inflation over those period of time, over a 15 or 20-year period or 30-year period, that you're going to use current prices now, that the value of a man's house that costs $500,000 to $3 million and charge him? Is that what they're doing? Yeah. I suspect so. So I don't know. I can't say off the bat. But it's a real concern, and I feel the fear of the population of Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, taking external pictures of people's property, I think, cannot be sufficiently empirical to determine annual rental value. But I leave that there because we will keep, the discussion going in another program. Yeah. Dr. Bhushan Singh, what are your thoughts moving forward? What can we forecast with this between now and the next budget?
Right. So I in terms of the dire need for revenue from the government, I understand that their need to gain some revenue, and they implemented the property tax. But as Richard was saying, I think what has the population uneasy is not necessarily the property tax per se, but the valuation methodology is not open, is not transparent enough. And it is coming at a quick time. This property implementation is coming very quickly, and people are not perhaps getting a chance to digest and understand all the intricacies of it. So the communication has to be, very clear. And if understanding the revenue side of it, I think it is important that the valuation methodology be open and clear, to remove the skepticism, to remove the doubt, and to make sure that from the country perspective, the government gets their money to keep the country afloat, but at the same time, the citizens don't feel disenfranchised, cheated in any way in terms of how their valuations were done.
All right, gentlemen, I want to thank you profusely. I really appreciate the time that you have taken to come on the program. I know that we will have a couple sessions which will deal with economy, finance. We will deal with mid-year review, upcoming mid-year review. We will have to treat with the upcoming budget, but that will be later on. But certainly mid-year review. And I know a critical aspect in looking at the overall proposal or handling of the government's fiscal policy will be property tax. We're going to be revisiting this. So if we don't deal with property tax by itself and its impacts on the economy, when we're dealing with general economy, we're going to have to factor in this in discussion. So I want to thank you, Dr. Bhushan Singh, for taking time out to join us on the program. Bhushan, I'm very appreciative yet again. I know we have to talk more about Article 4, IMF. We have to talk about some of the CSO statistics, and we have to talk about central bank bulletins and what those pictures are painting for us, and overall digest it and give some overview of it on the economy. Mr. Richard Ramkisoon, I want to thank you as well for coming on the program. I truly appreciate your time. As I said, I know you have serious commitments, and I want to say congratulations to Mr. Richard Ramkisoon as president and manager coach of the Central Sports Cricket Club, a club which is very dear to my heart as well. Richard, I know that you have just won the TTCB, the Trinidad and Tobago Cricket Board Premier League Cricket. You have cup first place, so I want to say congratulations to you and your team, the players. I have been seeing a lot, not one, not two, not three. I've been seeing a lot of commentary in the sports pages, because certainly winning it, this is your second consecutive win of the first place. So it shows a lot of dedication, discipline, and hard work, effort on the part of yourself, the club, the running of the club, and of course your players. So I want to say congratulations to you.
Thank you very much.
It would be remiss of me if I didn't mention that. And everyone knows that Richard's Invaders ground and the club belongs to Shogunas West. So it doesn't belong to in the sense of ownership, but in terms of the jurisdiction, it falls within the Shogunas West. And they always help. Richard, yourself, you help in a lot of the youth activities and the launch of what is a very successful girls team, youth girls team as well, yes, which I know they didn't fare too well in this this season, yeah. And but we expect great things to happen moving forward. So I want to thank him. Ladies and gentlemen, we take a quick break and just come back to close off the session.